I didn't know my life was about to fracture into a before and an after because of a single sentence my fiancé thought I would never hear. He said it laughingly, loud enough for his friends to hear, careless enough to believe the walls would protect him. "She means well," he said, "but she's not exactly someone you brag about." I stood frozen in the hallway outside his living room, my hand still wrapped around my jacket zipper, my breath trapped somewhere between my lungs and my throat. Every sound after that felt distorted, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the casual cruelty disguised as humor. I didn't walk in. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry or scream or make a scene. Instead, I left quietly, drove home, and sat in my car long after the engine went cold. My name is Olivia. I'm 30 years old. And 3 months ago, I learned something that changed the way I see love forever. People reveal who they really are when they think you're not listening. My fiancé, Caleb, and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. To the outside world, we were solid, predictable, safe. The kind of couple people assumed would make it down the aisle without drama. But in one careless moment, I realized I wasn't his partner. I was his compromise. What he didn't know, what he could never have predicted, was that instead of confronting him that night, I made a single phone call he never expected. A call that set something in motion he couldn't undo. 2 days later, when he walked into his apartment and heard a voice coming from his living room, a voice he never thought would be there, he stopped breathing. That was the moment everything he believed about me, about our relationship, and about who held the power, shattered. And the truth is, the sentence that broke us wasn't the cruelest part. The cruelest part was realizing how long I'd been shrinking myself so someone else could feel bigger. Before that night in the hallway, before the sentence that split my life in two, Caleb and I looked like a story that made sense. I was 27 when we met. I worked as a civil engineer for the city, steady hours, predictable pay, projects that took years instead of weeks. I liked knowing that what I did mattered, even if no one applauded it. Roads, water systems, drainage projects, things people only noticed when they failed. I wore practical clothes, drove a sensible car, and slept well at night knowing my work kept the city running. Caleb lived in a different world. He was in marketing at a tech startup, fast-paced, image-driven, obsessed with growth and perception. His conversations were filled with buzzwords and momentum. Everything was about visibility, positioning, and being seen as next level. Where I planned for decades, he thought in quarters. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. Loud music, dim lighting, too many people packed into one apartment. He found me by the kitchen, asked what I did, and actually listened to the answer. That felt rare. We talked for hours, and by the end of the night, he asked for my number, like it mattered. We started dating a few weeks later, and for a long time it worked. We were different, but complementary, or so I believed. I grounded him. He energized me. He loved telling people I was smart and stable. I loved how passionate he was about his work, how driven he seemed. The relationship progressed naturally. Weekend trips, holidays with each other's families, talks about the future that felt easy, not forced. His parents adored me. His mother called me practical in the best way. His father respected what I did, asked thoughtful questions about city projects. I felt accepted. The proposal happened last October. Caleb took me to the botanical gardens, where we'd had our third date. There was a fountain, autumn light filtering through the trees, people milling around, pretending not to stare. He got down on one knee and did everything by the book. I said yes. I cried. He cried. He posted about it immediately. Photos, captions, emojis. His friends flooded the comments with congratulations and heart emojis. From the outside, it was perfect. But looking back, the signs were already there. Little comments slipped in quietly. "My job's stable," I'd say, and he'd respond, "Yeah, stable, but have you ever thought about going private? That's where the real money is." He'd suggest I dress differently. "More like Amanda's boyfriend," he'd say casually. He always looked sharp. At dinners with his friends, conversations drifted toward promotions, startups, funding rounds. When it was my turn, I'd say something about a project timeline or infrastructure upgrades, and the energy would dip. Not hostile, just uninterested. I told myself it didn't matter, that love wasn't about bragging rights, that being solid was enough. I brushed off the discomfort as insecurity, as me needing thicker skin. What I didn't realize was that while I was defending him, to my mother, to myself, he was quietly downgrading me in rooms I wasn't in. By the time we were 6 months into the engagement, I thought we were planning a marriage. He was already framing a settlement. I just hadn't heard the words yet. The shift didn't announce itself. It crept in through tone, timing, and the way conversations subtly curved away from me. After the engagement, Caleb started hosting more social gatherings at his apartment, networking drinks that blurred into casual parties. His friends from work mixed with his old college circle, and I found myself standing at the edges of conversations more often than I used to. Not because anyone pushed me there, but because I felt misplaced, like the wrong font in a carefully designed layout. When people asked what I did, I answered honestly. I talked about a water main replacement downtown, about flood mitigation plans, about how infrastructure failures rarely make headlines unless something goes terribly wrong. I spoke with the same quiet pride I'd always had. Caleb, standing beside me, would smile tightly and redirect. "So yeah," he'd say, clapping his hands once, "we're all about innovation here." It was subtle, easy to miss, easy to excuse. His friends didn't mean harm, but their questions carried a tone that lingered. "Do you ever get bored? Isn't city work kind of slow? Have you thought about pivoting?" Caleb never corrected them. At home, the comments continued, never cruel, always framed as concern. "I just want you to reach your full potential," he said one night, while scrolling through his phone. "You're so capable. I just think you could do more. More than keeping a city running. More than preventing disasters no one would ever thank us for. More than being reliable." I started to notice how often he compared me to other people's partners, not directly, but through stories. "Amanda's boyfriend just made partner. Ethan's startup got funding. Marcus drives this insane car now." Each story landed like a quiet measurement. I told myself it was normal, that he was just ambitious, that wanting more didn't mean wanting less of me. But then there were the moments that didn't fit that narrative. At a dinner with his friends, someone asked when we were setting a wedding date. Before I could answer, Caleb laughed lightly and said, "We're not in a rush, we're being practical." Practical. The word stuck. At another gathering, someone joked about settling down too early. Caleb didn't defend us. He shrugged and said, "Life's about trade-offs." I went quiet after that. The night that broke everything came at the end of February, on a Saturday that should have been ordinary. Caleb was hosting a girls' night. Wine, takeout, laughter. He asked me to stop by later, around 10, once dinner wrapped up. I finished a work obligation early and arrived at 9:47 p.m., thinking I'd surprise him. I had a key. I let myself in quietly, smiling to myself, already imagining the look on his face. Then I heard my name. I stopped in the entryway, jacket half off, listening as if my body had decided before my mind could catch up. The laughter that followed his words wasn't uncomfortable, it was genuine. And in that laughter, I understood something I'd been avoiding for months. This wasn't a bad moment. This was how he talked about me when he thought I wasn't listening. And once you hear that, you can never unhear it. I stood there in the entryway, my jacket still half on, my body frozen in a way I'd never experienced before. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Thick, suffocating disbelief. From the living room, their voices carried clearly. "But seriously," one of his friends said, "you two are cute together." Caleb laughed. Not awkwardly, not nervously. He laughed like someone who felt safe. "Yeah," he replied. "She means well." There was a pause, a deliberate one. "But she's not exactly someone you brag about." The words landed hard, like something physical hitting my chest. I felt my breath catch, my fingers tightening around the fabric of my jacket. The room erupted in laughter. Not uncomfortable laughter. Not the kind that tries to smooth things over. Real amusement. Another voice chimed in. "Melissa," I thought. "What do you mean?" Caleb answered without hesitation. "She's a city engineer. She wears practical clothes, drives an old car. She's fine, stable, reliable. She'll be a great mom someday. But when Amanda talks about her partner's promotion, or when you guys bring up startups and funding rounds, I've got nothing to add. Like, my fiancé fixed a water main this week." More laughter. My stomach turned. Someone asked, "Then why are you marrying her?" And that's when he said the thing that shattered whatever denial I had left. "Because I'm almost 30. I want to be married by 30. She checks the boxes. She's responsible. She wants kids. She's safe. Just not impressive." I don't remember every sound after that. I remember the ringing in my ears, the heat behind my eyes, The strange calm that followed, like my body had decided panic wouldn't help. I didn't walk in. I didn't announce myself. I quietly put my jacket back on, turned the lock without a sound, and left the apartment like a ghost. The drive home passed in a blur. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, replaying his words over and over. Checks the boxes. Safe. Not impressive. That was how he saw me. Not as a partner, not as someone he was proud of, as a timeline solution. Eventually, I picked up my phone and made a call I'd been avoiding for weeks. My mother answered on the second ring. "Mom," I said, my voice unsteady despite my best effort, "are you free to talk?" That one call didn't change everything, but it started something he never saw coming. I told my mother everything that night, not in a dramatic rush, not through tears or raised voices. The words came out slowly, carefully, as if I was laying evidence on a table and examining it for the first time. I repeated what I'd heard. The laughter. The way he said safe like it was an insult. The sentence about checking boxes. She didn't interrupt me once. That's one of the things I've always loved about her. When something matters, she listens like every word deserves space. When I finally stopped talking, there was a long pause on the line. Then she said gently, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to confront him. Part of me just wants to end it and walk away." She exhaled softly. "Olivia, I need you to really hear me now." I closed my eyes. "Your father was a city engineer for 35 years, she said. "He wore practical clothes, drove sensible cars. He built infrastructure this city still relies on. He was never flashy, never rich, never someone people bragged about at parties." I felt my throat tighten. "But he was proud of his work," she continued. "And I was proud of him every single day." I couldn't speak. "If someone can't see the value in what you do," she said, firmer now, "they don't deserve access to your life. Not your time, not your loyalty, not your future." We talked for over an hour. About respect, about partnership, about the difference between ambition and contempt. By the end of the call, I didn't feel calmer, but I felt clearer. The next morning, Caleb texted me around 10. "Hey, babe, sorry you couldn't make it last night. Things got a little wild. Want to do brunch?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Either he didn't remember what he'd said, or he remembered perfectly and was testing whether I'd say anything. "Can't today," I replied. "Have some things to take care of. Talk later." That Sunday, I didn't leave my apartment. I paced. I replayed conversations from the past year, noticing things I'd dismissed before. The comments, the comparisons, the way he'd never defended my work when others minimized it. On Monday morning, I called my mother again. "I need to do something," I said, "and I need your help." I explained my idea. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. "That's either brilliant or petty," she said. "Maybe both. Is that a yes?" "That's absolutely a yes." And just like that, the plan began to take shape. My mother has always been quietly formidable. She spent 20 years as a school principal, which meant she knew everyone in our mid-sized city, or at least knew someone who did. When she decided something needed to happen, it usually did. The call I made to her Saturday night wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. One of her longtime friends, Patricia, sat on the city council. For years, Patricia had tried to get me to speak at community events. Town halls, forums, anything that would help residents understand the invisible work behind the city's infrastructure. I'd always said no. Public speaking made my skin crawl. I didn't want attention. I didn't need validation. On Monday morning, I called Patricia myself. "That offer to speak," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Is it still open?" She sounded surprised and pleased. "Of course it is. What changed your mind?" "Let's just say I'm ready to be more visible." She told me about a town hall on Wednesday evening at the Civic Center. Big turnout expected. Local news coverage. The mayor would be there. The topic was the city's new infrastructure initiatives. "I'll do it," I said. "Fantastic," she replied. "Can you prepare remarks about the water treatment project you led last year? It's exactly the kind of success story people need to hear." That project had taken 18 months. Endless meetings, emergency fixes, long nights. It had prevented what could have become a major public health crisis and saved the city millions. It was important work, even if it didn't come with a flashy title. I spent Monday and Tuesday preparing, not just writing remarks, but making sure the right people would be there. I contacted colleagues and mentioned the expected press. I reached out to local news stations myself, offered interviews, shared data and visuals that showed the scope of what our team had accomplished. Tuesday evening, I texted Caleb. Hey, something came up with work. Might be busy the next few days. Can we postpone Thursday dinner? He replied quickly. Sure, everything okay? Yeah, just some high visibility stuff. I'll explain later. On Wednesday afternoon, I made one more call. This one to Melissa, his best friend. Random question, I said. You still doing freelance photography? She was. I hired her to cover the town hall event, professional photos for LinkedIn, and for the city's communications department. I didn't explain the full context. I didn't need to. The event was public, widely promoted. Cameras were guaranteed. At 6:15 p.m., I arrived at the Civic Center in my best suit. My mother sat in the front row. Patricia introduced me to city council members, to reporters, to the mayor himself. At 7:30, I took the stage. I spoke about infrastructure, about the unglamorous work that keeps cities safe, about the team I led and the disaster we prevented. I showed photos of massive pipes replaced, filtration systems upgraded, data that proved our work mattered. The crowd applauded. The mayor shook my hand on stage and called me an asset to the city. Afterward, a reporter interviewed me about future projects. Cameras flashed. Melissa's camera clicked steadily. I watched her expression change as she realized what she was capturing. Who I was, what I did, how wrong the narrative had been. I went home that night without calling Caleb. I didn't need to. The escalation had already begun. That night, after the town hall, I sat alone on my couch with the lights off, still wearing my suit, listening to the distant hum of traffic outside. The adrenaline had drained from my body, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt exposed. For the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding since the hallway outside his living room. Why did it hurt so much? It wasn't just the sentence. It wasn't just being dismissed in front of his friends. It was the realization that somewhere along the way, I had started measuring myself by his scale. That I had quietly accepted the idea that my work needed to be justified, upgraded, translated into something flashier to be worthy of pride. I'd internalized his values without noticing. Lying there in the dark, I replayed moments I'd minimized. The way I'd softened my descriptions of my projects. The way I'd laughed along when someone called my job boring. The way I'd apologized for not being more exciting. That realization cut deeper than anything he'd said. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. I saw the news. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't answer. Then another. This is amazing. I'm so proud of you. Proud. The word felt heavy now. Conditional. I turned my phone face down and stared at the ceiling, my chest tight. The sadness hit then. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a deep, aching grief for the future I'd imagined. The wedding. The shared life. The version of love I thought we were building. I cried quietly, curled on my side, mourning something that had already been gone for longer than I'd realized. By morning, the doubt crept in. Was I overreacting? Was this worth ending everything over? Couldn't people grow? Those questions are dangerous in the quiet hours. But beneath them was a clearer truth. If it took public applause for him to respect me, then he had never truly respected me at all. By the time the sun came up, my eyes burned, my head ached, and my heart felt bruised. But something inside me had settled. I knew I was standing at the lowest point of the story. And I also knew I couldn't go back to who I'd been before hearing those words. Not after seeing myself clearly. Thursday morning arrived quietly, almost deceptively normal. I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. 17 notifications. 12 from Caleb. The rest from colleagues, friends, even a former professor. People congratulating me on the town hall, on the news coverage, on finally getting the recognition you deserve. I watched the messages stack up without opening them, my chest tightening with every vibration. Caleb's text started early. OMG, I just saw you on the morning news. Why didn't you tell me you were speaking at the town hall? This is incredible. I'm so proud of you. Call me when you wake up. I didn't call. I showered, got dressed, went to work, had meetings, answered emails, lived my life like the ground beneath me hadn't shifted. He called 3 times that morning. I declined all of them. Around 11, I finally texted back. In meetings all day. Can we talk tonight? His reply came instantly. Yes. Please come over after work. I'll make dinner. When I arrived at his apartment that evening, he opened the door with a smile so wide it almost hurt to look at. He wrapped his arms around me, tight, possessive, like someone reclaiming something they were afraid of losing. I'm so proud of you, he said again. Why didn't you tell me? I would have been there. I stepped inside but didn't return the hug. Are you? I asked. He blinked. Of course I am. You were on the news. The mayor called you an asset. That's huge. It's the same work I've always done, Caleb. The smile slipped. The same job you told your friends wasn't exactly something you brag about. The color drained from his face. What? I came by your apartment Saturday night, I said calmly. Around 9:45. I heard everything. He opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes darted away like he was searching for an escape route. You said I was safe, reliable, that I check boxes, that I'm not impressive, that you're marrying me because you want to be married by 30. Tears filled his eyes immediately. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I was just venting, he said, his voice breaking. I was frustrated. I didn't think... Because I'm not flashy enough? I asked. Because I don't have a startup or a fancy title? I do respect you, he insisted. I really do. Do you? I asked quietly. Or do you just respect me now that other people do? He couldn't answer. I reached for my hand, slid the engagement ring off my finger, and placed it gently on the kitchen counter between us. I need someone who's proud of me when there are no cameras, I said. When I'm just doing my job in practical clothes, fixing things no one notices. Someone who sees value without needing the world to confirm it. He collapsed into sobs. Please don't do this. I love you. You made a choice, I said softly. You chose to see me as something you were settling for. I walked out. He didn't follow. And for the first time since that night in the hallway, I felt the power settle fully back into my own hands. The aftermath didn't explode. It unraveled. For the first few days after I left his apartment, Caleb tried everything. Calls that went unanswered, texts that grew longer and more desperate, apologies layered on top of promises to change. He sent paragraphs at midnight and voice notes in the morning, his tone swinging between remorse and disbelief, as if he still couldn't understand how one night of venting had ended an entire future. I didn't engage, not because I was angry, but because I was done explaining my worth to someone who only recognized it once the crowd did. The engagement announcement disappeared from his social media within a week. No explanation, just gone. People noticed, questions followed. The same friends who'd laughed that night started reaching out quietly. Jessica texted first. I'm so sorry. We shouldn't have laughed. We called him out after everything came out. Melissa followed with the longer message. She admitted the town hall had forced her to confront what had been said that night, and how wrong it was. She apologized without excuses. I appreciated that more than she probably realized. His family reacted differently. His mother called once, carefully neutral, asking if we could talk things through. I declined politely. His father sent a brief message wishing me well. That meant more than any plea would have. At work, the town hall had changed something for me too. Colleagues treated me with a new kind of respect. Not louder, not performative, just solid. I was invited into conversations I'd previously opted out of, asked for input, asked to lead. I realized then that the fallout wasn't just happening to him. It was happening around me, and I was no longer standing in the blast radius. Weeks later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Caleb was struggling. Not dramatically, not publicly, but internally. The version of me he'd dismissed no longer existed to prop him up, and the version he'd tried to reclaim was gone. He was forced to sit with the truth he'd avoided. That validation borrowed from others evaporates quickly when it's no longer convenient. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. I felt distance, the kind that tells you you've moved on. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't correct the narrative. I didn't post subtweets or explanations. I simply stepped forward into a life where I wasn't an afterthought. And the truth, quiet, relentless, did the rest on its own. 3 months have passed since I placed the ring on his kitchen counter and walked out of that apartment. Long enough for the shock to fade, long enough for the noise to quiet, long enough for me to hear my own thoughts again. I won't pretend it was easy at first. There were mornings I woke up reaching for my phone, instinctively expecting a message from him. There were moments when the weight of what I'd lost, the wedding plans, the shared future, the version of love I thought I had, pressed down on my chest without warning. But something unexpected happened alongside the grief. I started to feel steady. I stopped apologizing for my work, stopped downplaying what I do, stopped explaining myself to people who weren't actually listening. I remembered why I chose civil engineering in the first place, because infrastructure isn't glamorous, but it's essential. Cities don't function without people willing to do the work no one claps for. There's dignity in that. There's pride in that. I realized how deeply I'd absorbed his values without noticing, how I'd started measuring myself by someone else's idea of impressive. Walking away wasn't just leaving him, it was shedding a version of myself that had learned to shrink. A few weeks ago, I met someone new, not through apps, not through networking, at a community meeting for a city project. He's a landscape architect. Our first conversation wasn't about titles or status, it was about stormwater management, native plants, and why cities need green spaces as much as concrete. He asks questions, real ones. He listens like the answers matter. Last week, he came with me on a site visit, watched me in work boots and a safety vest, explaining systems most people never think about. When we left, he smiled and said, "It's really attractive how passionate you are about what you do." That's the difference. Caleb needed the world to tell him I was worth bragging about. This man sees it without permission. My mother asked me recently if I had any regrets. Maybe the town hall thing was a little petty, I admitted. But I think I needed it. She nodded. Sometimes we need a moment that reminds us who we are. That's the lesson I'd leave with anyone listening to this. Don't build a life with someone who only values you when others do. Don't marry someone who sees you as a timeline solution. And never confuse being safe with being less than. The right person doesn't need an audience to respect you. They already know. And once you know that, you never settle for anything else again.